Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September monthly LEA Special Education Point of Contact webinar. My name is Annette Thacker-Bartlett. I am with the OSSI Division of Elementary, Secondary, and Specialized Education, and I'm joined today by Ms. LEA Diggs-Natiko with the OSSI Division of Data Assessment and Research. The Department of Transportation has also contributed to today's webinar. As a reminder, you can download a copy of the slides using the Handouts tool in your menu bar for GoToWebinar. Today we're going to spend the first 15 minutes with important announcements and updates that focus mostly on transportation and things going on there, and new tools and resources for you, as well as reminders. Then we are going to spend the majority of the webinar on the child count training. This is a mandatory training. Some of you might have already done this training at the August 4th Summit. We invite you to stay for a refresher, as now we are in the midst of child count season. And if you did not attend that training on August 4th, then you do need to have this required training today. So thank you for your participation. Now, before we get started, we'd like to give you an update about SEDS. As you know, SEDS went offline starting Sunday night through Monday yesterday. We have on the line the SEDS team who will be able to answer your questions if you type them in the question chat box. And we do want to announce that at this time, if you have an LEA SEDS account, your access should have been restored by now. Those who have SEDS aggregate accounts do not yet have access restored. We are working on that and hope to have updates shortly. So again, if you have a non-aggregate, just regular SEDS account, you should be able to access SEDS now as well as your staff. If you have an aggregate account, you still do not have access, but we hope to restore that shortly. And again, the SEDS team is on the line should you wish to put questions in the chat box. Okay, and then we just want to remind you that last month we had our monthly webinar where we discussed some important topics. If you missed last month's webinar, please take a look at the slides. Please listen to the recording. In particular, there's a couple SEDS updates that happened over the summer that we want to make you aware of. They're not anything substantive, they're just to increase user functionality, make it easier to use SEDS and to navigate within SEDS. We also reminded you how to get non-public staff access to students in SEDS, which OSSI plays a role in, and you also play a role in getting them access to those students. And we told you in the last webinar about how there will be a universal password reset happening in October 20th, which we will provide more information as the date approaches. It should not require anything major on your end. It will just be when people log in after October 20th, they will be prompted to reset their password, verify their email, and update their security questions. Okay, now for today, CLICK. As you know, this past school year, the CLICK tool was rolled out, and at that time, it was just limited access. Access was limited to LEA data managers and LEA special ed points of contact. We are excited to announce that we have purchased thousands of additional tokens, and we will be issuing those according to this schedule. So phase 1, we are going to make sure that everyone who is a priority eSchool Plus point of contact has access to CLICK and the relevant apps within that. Priority POCs are people like you, enrollment audit POC, homeless liaison, transportation, registrars, etc. Now, in order to get that, you should have been listed in eSchool Plus by September 8th as having one of these roles. Phase 2, your data manager can request tokens to CLICK for non-priority POCs who are listed in eSchool Plus by October 6th. That's when OSSI will go confirm those roles. Now, these will be given upon request. Have your data manager submit a ticket in the OSSI support tool to get a token for those non-priority POCs. Or if your priority POC was not in eSchool Plus by September 8th, for example, if you were newly hired as the SPED POC and only recently got your name put into eSchool Plus, then have your data manager submit a ticket to OSSI Support Tool, letting them know that you need access to Click. Phase 3, we are pleased to announce that related service providers will be given access to Click, which is great because they will be able to use the Related Services Management Report, the RSMR, in the same way that you use it, but of course restricted to their student population. But to do that, you need to make sure they are listed as one of your providers in SEDS by September 29th. And then phase 5, we will be giving access to teachers, and of course their information needs to be in eSchool Plus accurately as well by that deadline. For questions, please email Stephanie Davis or submit a ticket in the OSSI Support Tool. And this is just a reminder of how your data manager can verify the correct contact information in eSchool Plus. OSSI really relies on this information in eSchool Plus to know who's who at LEAs and who to contact when certain topics come up. Okay, so transportation, some important reminders. There are still many, many students who are eligible for transportation according to their IEP, but who are missing a route in TOTE. They are missing that very important form in TOTE, the transportation request form, that allows OSSI to go ahead and set up a bus route or other types of transportation. So you, as the LEA Special Ed POC, you need to work with your transportation POC. You might be the transportation POC in some cases, so work with yourself. You need to get these two lists and do a side-by-side comparison. You need to look at the list in TOTE, and I'm going to show you a picture of where to find this in TOTE. You need to find that list in TOTE that has all the students where their IEP says yes, eligible for transportation. So my list on the left is an example of a list of students whose IEP says yes, they need transportation. And on the right, you can see I have a list from TOTE of all the students who currently have transportation set up. Their request form has been submitted and they got a route set up. You need to compare those lists. And here's an example where Charlie Brown and Babe Ruth are both missing that transportation request. Now, in Charlie Brown's situation, it turns out he no longer needs transportation, but his name is on that list, and OSSI thinks that he's missing a request form. So you need to amend the IEP to change the transportation eligibility to no for those students who no longer need transportation, but perhaps their IEP still says yes. If you have students that are like Babe Ruth, who they definitely still are eligible for transportation and they need that transportation, but are missing the request form in TOTE, please do that immediately. Work with your transportation POC to do that immediately. And here is a reminder of how to get those two lists. So this is how to find that list of students who have that yes on their IEP. You go to the Students tab and you can pull that list right there. And I put a reminder here of how to get assistance with TOTE. If you are not a TOTE administrator, please pass this information along to your TOTE person, because it's very critical that we get these students set up with transportation now that several weeks have gone by since the start of school. And then here is where you can find a list of student transportation whose routes are set. So then you can do a side-by-side comparison of those two lists, like students who qualify for transportation versus students who actually have transportation set up. And again, this is very urgent to get this done because there are students that are missing transportation, missing out on school and being denied FAPE because they can't get to school because they don't have their route set up. So please work with your transportation admin, with your parents, and to get this information into TOTE. And we are excited to announce that there's going to be a new app in Click. A new app in Click where you and many of your staff members, you don't have to go into TOTE. You can just see in Click student level details for transportation, including like pickup and drop-off times and addresses. It'll be like a one-stop shop to just see what's going on with the student and transportation. So those who are listed as a SPED POC or a transportation POC in eSchool Plus, you will be given this app this app will be added to your Click account. Again, that's only if you are listed as this POC role in eSchool Plus. So the app, we don't have an exact release date, but we know it is coming soon, and we will keep you updated. And we are pleased to announce, hopefully you've already heard about this, but we have a reimbursement policy. If your LEA, for some reason, gets very late notice that a student is coming to your LEA and you don't have enough time to get that transportation request finalized with OSSI, but that student needs to get to school, there is a policy by which your LEA can get reimbursed for providing that transportation yourself or through an agent or contractor. So to read more about that policy, please follow this link here. And if you have questions, you should contact the transportation team. I have their email listed at the end of this webinar. Okay, and now I'm going to turn the time over to Leah for the child count portion of this training. But before I do that, I just want to ask, I have Stephanie on the line with the SEDS team. Stephanie, do you have any additional information about the SEDS system issues that you'd like to share with the group at this time?
Basically, can you hear me, Annette?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Okay, great. So yes, the one thing I will say that the outage was very much unexpected. OSSI had no other recourse except to take the system down when we did on Monday night. We are working diligently to get those with aggregate accounts back up. However, we did notice that some users have aggregate accounts that do not really need an aggregate account to access their LEAs. So we're looking into that as well. Know that it will take a couple of days to get everyone, since there are over 3,000 users who had aggregate accounts, everyone back into the system. Yes, I am receiving your emails and working diligently to resolve them as quickly as possible. And I have a team who will start working on the other ones as of this afternoon. So again, if you have any questions, you can always email me, but just know it may be a delayed response. I may not be able to respond within the next 30, 40 minutes, but you will get a response from me. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now I'll turn the time over to Leah for child count.
Thank you, Annette. So again, my name is Leah Diggs-Natiko, and we are going to talk today about child count, so understanding and preparing for child count. So we are going to review the child count timeline, overview of the child count process, highlight what's new for this audit process. We're going to discuss some common issues and errors, also talk about Unified Data Errors Click app, and also share some tips about how you can support your enrollment audit POC. So this slide here shows the child count timeline. So we've had training starting from August 4th and to today, September 20th. October 17th through November 17th, LEAs access, review, and resolve all child count data anomalies. October 13th, LEAs sign the enrollment audit and anomalies acknowledgement form. November 20th, LEAs sign data certification form. And December 15th, LEAs sign the final enrollment audit and child count acknowledgement form.
So the December 15th is actually the November 20th where they signed the last child count format, and the December 15th is the final acknowledgement of end of audit.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie.
No problem, quite welcome.
So a child count is federally mandated activity, is reported annually, and serves as the official special education enrollment number for the District of Columbia. In accordance with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and all applicable DC laws and regulations, each local education agency is required to certify the accuracy and reliability of its data to OSSI. Here we're going to talk about the overview of the child count process. So accuracy of special education data impacts funding for special education. All of the data to be reviewed by child count comes through the special education data system, which is a system of record. If any of the student's special education information is inaccurate, the data must be corrected and the source system SEDS. Students enrolled as of October 5th are included. They must also have a current IEP and current eligibility. And IEP amendments must be completed by 5 o'clock on November 17th. To make this just a little bit clearer, we have here a table in which we'll show you when a student will be included in child count. So if a student has a current IEP and current eligibility, they're receiving services under IDEA, they are included in child count. If they have an expired IEP but a current eligibility and they're receiving services under IDEA, they are included in child count. If they have a current IEP and expired eligibility, they are receiving services under IDEA, they are included in child count. If they have a current IEP and they have no eligibility determination and they are receiving services under IDEA, they are included in child count. Now, if you have an expired IEP and expired eligibility and they're not receiving services under IDEA, they are not included in child count. And if they do not have an IEP or the IEP has not been finalized, but they do have a current eligibility determination and they are not receiving services under IDEA, they are not going to be included in child count. So the process for this year's child count has changed a little bit. So we have streamlined the process. LEAs must review and update the data in the respective source systems. There is not going to be an appeals process. For the 2017 child count, all data will be certified through the enrollment audit and child count application. Therefore, OSSI will not hold an appeals process as we have previously. And we do have some additional certification timelines. In all cases where there is identified data discrepancies, LEAs must resolve the errors in a manner that complies with all IDEA procedural requirements. So here I'd like to talk about some common issues and errors, and by all means, submit your questions in the question box. Some of these common issues and errors we have noticed in our OSSI support tool. These questions have come up repeatedly, so we've decided to go ahead and discuss them here, and hopefully this will assist you in preparing for the child count audit. So if you have a student that has an expired IEP and an active eligibility, and this is a SPED error, we ask that you hold an IEP meeting and update the finalized IEP and SEDS. Now this is a SPED error, and a way that you'll be able to determine that this is a SPED error is through our CLIck application, which is the Unified Data Errors application. There is a sheet in there for special education errors, and I'm going to go through and show you that in just a moment. So here we have active in SEDS but withdrawn in SIS. The suggested resolution is that you should ensure that the appropriate exit code was used. If the appropriate code was used, the LEA should follow the process in SIS to have the student administratively exit from the roster. Now, just because you exit a student from your student information system, it doesn't mean that the student's going to automatically be removed from SEDS. We received several tickets regarding this, so some of the issues have been students have graduated, students have not been attending the LEA for several years. So there is a process that LEAs are required to follow. It's in the entry and exit code guidance. But I do have my colleague, Ms. Rita Larkins, who will talk about the one of the main issues that we've kind of seen, which is students who have graduated either with a diploma or with a certificate.
Great, thank you, Leah. For students that have Okay. Students that have already graduated. If the student graduated with a certificate, they're going to remain on your SEDS roster until either they have done a revocation of services or the student reaches age 22. Since they're still able to receive those services, they'll remain on your roster. That's just for certificate students. So, but if a student has graduated with a diploma, the LEA is required to complete the graduating documents in SEDS, and that includes a summary of performance and a PWN, and then we will verify from the grad list. So from the certified grad list, the student appears on that grad list, then we will do an administrative exit in SEDS for that student.
Thank you, Rita.
You're welcome.
So another issue that we have come across is educational environment for the students. So an LEA should review the student's date of birth to ensure that the age is accurate. If the age is not accurate, then the LEA should enter the student's date of birth and the student information system. If the age displayed in the enrollment audit child count data is accurate, then the LEA will need to select the age-appropriate educational environment in SEDS by completing an IEP amendment. Now, just to take this a step further, in SEDS, when you are going to complete your IEP amendment, there will be a section during the IEP amendment process where you are to go into the LRE section and update the educational environment. And then you will go back and complete the IEP amendment. So that can be done during the IEP amendment. So what we have noticed, though, is that some folks will just go ahead, change it in the LRE section without actually doing the IEP amendment, and that is not going to be sufficient. You have to complete the IEP amendment, change it in the LRE section of the IEP process, and then finalize the IEP amendment. So another SPED error is student turned age 6. So OSSI has some logic to account for this. So if the student turned age 6 5 days prior to November 17th certification, those students are going to be excluded from the error pools based upon the date of birth. So OSSI has taken this into account. So another error that we see a lot is specialized instruction and or missing services. So what may happen is that on the student's IEP, what we've noticed sometimes is that the date of the services actually terminates, so say sometimes it's even like a couple days after the IEP was, either the IEP amendment or the IEP date. Just make sure that those dates of those services are for the duration of time of the IEP, or else you're going to end up getting this, this SPED error. So another error is developmental delay. So if the student has reached age 8, the LEA should conduct a reevaluation to determine the appropriate category and finalize the IEP. If the student's date of birth is inaccurate, the LEA should correct this in the student information system. So here are some additional issues and errors. So when you're searching for student in SEDS and while you're preparing for a child count, please be mindful that if you're filtering by special ed only, this is not going to include students who have expired IEPs and whose students' records have not fully transferred. Also, if the special education level is incorrect, please confirm the service start and end dates are correct, and confirm the least restrictive environment percentage and checkboxes are appropriately marked. This education environment will be pulled from the most recent IEP in SEDS and will be displayed in SLED. If the education environment is not accurate, it may be appropriate to complete an IEP amendment to make this correction.
Before we go there, Before we go there, users are asking if we can go into the LRE section and says to show them where those corrections should be made.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have a fake student. Oops.
Do like a grade.
I think it was testing. Okay. Okay, so in the IEP amendment process, it's going to ask you to change the LRE. So what you're going to do from the IEP amendment process, you're going to go to IEP and you're going to go to least restrictive environment. And here is where the educational environment, the checkboxes or the radio buttons that you're going to select.
So this is done via, some of you are asking if this is a special kind of IEP amendment to correct this. The answer is no. You do this IEP amendment the same way that you would do any other IEP amendment. And when you are working on creating the standard IEP amendment form, you just select the reason why you do it. Right there, you click Change Specialized Instruction, and then you will see a drop-down category that says Edit the LRE Justification, or you can choose to do Other, and just put a quick note about how you're changing the LRE environment to match the percentage of time outside general ed.
And the age.
Or the age, exactly. And so you just put a few notes here. You don't need to write a lot of detail because this is just correcting an error. It's not fundamentally changing the type of services or the placement, things like that. And this is the type of amendment that I would suggest seeing if mom or dad is okay with doing it without having a meeting. If you send this form to them and the form clearly explains that you're just correcting it to match other information on the IEP or to match the correct age, hopefully they'll just sign off on it pretty quickly, and then you can finalize that amendment in SEDS. Of course, if a parent requests to have a meeting, you need to honor that right. But hopefully this is just a quick IEP amendment without a meeting, and you just follow the regular process. And because the reason why this happens is because in the IEP process, when you're talking about LRE, this percentage here automatically calculates depending on the services that you put on the previous page. However, the radio buttons down here do not automatically change to match this percentage. And that's something that, that you need to remind and train your SEDS users on, that when they're doing an IEP, they need to manually select the correct radio button here, otherwise it might default to the button that was there previously. So again, this percentage gets calculated automatically, but you have to manually select the LRE category. And that is something every year with child count that causes people to have to do amendments, which I know does take time. It's an administrative burden. So if we just train people to manually select the correct button here to match the percentage up here, that can save you some time on the back end with child count.
Yes, okay. So another question we're going to take about review the process for handling errors where they have missing specialized services and related services. Can you go to the services section, Leah, in the IEP?
You mean the
services and supplemental aids to your left. So it is in this screen where you're going to select and update the services. A couple of important things I want to point out here. You see the box where you have the amount of time. That is a calculated field. So that's calculating the amount of time that you say a student is going to receive a service. Another important error that happens a lot for the purposes of child count, we see this, is that the end date of the service has already expired. If the service is already expired, that will not count towards your service hours when you get to the next page. So it would actually take that out of your calculation. You want to make sure that your services are still active and in force. So that end date is very important the end date for that particular service. Same with the related services. So also, if you click the drop down for the setting, you want to make sure that you are selecting the appropriate setting. If it were outside of general ed and you did an amendment to change that, you want to make sure that you go back and actually click that box where you're changing the in or out of general ed setting, the amount of time, and then your begin and end date for those services.
Okay, so keep those questions coming, and we will show you in SEDS and the other systems where you can resolve these. Okay, in child count, here we have the child count summary of action. So here are the different data types. So we have demographic and we have special education. So for demographic, we have name, date of birth, race, ethnicity. So you are required to review that these are accurate. If they are accurate, then no action is necessary. If inaccurate, please update in the source system, which is going to be your student information system. So if you're using eSchool Plus, PowerSchool, Aspen, School Force, Proactive, etc. So then the other data type is special education. So here we have a disability, IEP date, educational environment, dedicated aid, and then here we have the different required actions as well. And again, this is available in the handout section of this webinar. So again, please be sure that all students listed are enrolled as of October 5th. Ensure all demographic and special education information is accurate for all students. Be sure the education environment indicated is accurate, and review and resolve all data anomalies no later than November 17th to be considered timely. So I'm going to show you where you can actually find these data anomalies. So you should have access to Click. And you would use your SLED login credentials. If you do not have access, please reach out to OSSI. So I'm just going to actually just go into a training environment where we have unified data errors. And that's where you would go. It would be 17, 18 unified data errors. This is, again, a training environment, so it's all fake data. So here we have different sheets. So we have the summary sheet, the enrollment data, duplicate enrollments, attendance, and special education data errors. So this is where you're going to want to go to the special education errors. And here, this is going to show you the total count of the special education errors and then the total number of unique students. Here we have different radio buttons. So we have impacts child count. And if I select this, then the count now changes. So we have 710 special education data errors, and we have 604 unique students that these errors are impacting. Now here I have the error information. So these are the different errors that we were referring to. So active in SEDS but not in SIS. If I select this error, then I notice that it's 152 students. Here at the bottom we have the student demographics. So we have the student's USI, the student's name, gender, date of birth, the school, and then we have the IEP information. So OSSI is letting you know which students have these particular errors. And then up here in the suggested resolution, we tell you what the resolution is, so you can go to resolve it, and then we give you the estimated time frame about how long it should take to resolve it and remove this error. Now, I have made the selection. If I want to remove this, I just select the X up here, and this is going to remove my filter. And then I can select any other errors. And you can work to resolve the errors that way. You can always export this information as well. So again, remember though, this is student data. Please be mindful when you export the data. So in order to export it, I right-click on the table below, and I can export it. And it's going to export as a CSV file. So again, this is all fake data. And this might make it, you know, kind of easier if you would like to be able to work in this manner as well. So, but again, this is private student information, so please be mindful. So again, if you do not have access to the Unified Data Errors app, or if you do not have access to Click, by all means, just shoot us an email, and we will, or just let us know in the chat box, and we will work with you to get you access. Okay. So here we're talking about the Unified Data Click app. All special education POCs should have access to this application. And again, if you need access, submit an OST ticket. So here, though, we have a lot of different data systems that can actually impact child count. So one of them is the LEA membership tracker. So if the student has demographic conflict, the demographic conflict must be corrected in order to be included in the roster. So we have 6 demographic elements that we're looking at. So first name, last name, date of birth, race, gender, and ethnicity. If what you're seeing in SEDS for a student, if their demographic information is different, that's OSCE's authoritative data. So what you would need to do is work with your data manager or your school approver to have the student's demographic data corrected. In order to correct it, they have to upload documentation, and we have a whole host of trainings that we've actually just scheduled. They are available in our in OSCE's QuickBase training application. So you can have folks sign up for those trainings. So also another system that impacts child count is the Click Unified Data Errors, which I just walked through, SEDS, and exit management. So exit management comes into place when you go to withdraw a student. If you withdraw a student and documentation is required, that student is still going to show up on the roster. Or if you exit a student and some action is to occur. So for example, if a student is transferred to another LEA within the district, OSCE is actually going to look to see that that student is transferred to another LEA in the district. If the student does not transfer, or OSCE does not receive that in the feed, then that student is going to remain on your roster, and you are going to have to either do some due diligence or change the exit code to find out where the student has actually transitioned to. And again, we're also offering training on exit management in conjunction with the LEA membership tracker. Those trainings are already scheduled and are available for folks to sign up for in the training application, which I will go to right now and just show you. So OSCE has, and we have a data systems training registration site. You do not need to have any special credentials in order to access it, and we have the trainings listed here. So we have one in person on the 6th, and then we have several webinars that are available here as well. And the membership tracker training is going to include demographics and exit management. So I'm not sure if you are aware, but every LEA has an LEA liaison. So if you have specific questions, by all means, you can always submit a ticket in OSCE support tool, but you also have a LEA liaison that you can reach out to as well. So the liaisons can assist you with matters relating to start of school, enrollment audit, child count, and other data collection activities throughout the year. If you do not know who your DAR liaison is, You can always do just a quick, easy Google search
I'll
for.
put the link in the
Awesome.
box.
Because we are in the process of revising our website, so sometimes it's kind of just easier to just
Bookmarks.
do just a Google search. But here we go.
So
And
it's the link's being sent in the comments right now.
Okay, so Annette's sending that to you guys in the comment section, so everybody will have that as well. And again, if you have any questions, by all means, please put them in the question box, and we will take some time and respond to their questions. So we are still here, but we were just going through the chat box, seeing if there were any questions. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the question box. We will be here for the next couple of minutes. We'll be here till 11. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the question box. The next webinar is Wednesday, October 18th from 10 to 11. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today, and we will see you back here on October 18th.